During the reading of the will, my son William blurted out loudly in front of everyone, "If that is true and he gets a portion, I will give up mine." I remained silent and smiled quietly. He had no idea the inheritance was worth 11 million. "I am grateful to have you here. Stay with my story until the very end and leave a comment telling me the city you are watching from, so I can see how far my tale has traveled." The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, paused as his eyes shifted nervously between William and me. The atmosphere thickened with uneasy silence. I sensed the heavy gaze of everyone in the room. My daughter-in-law Denise's smug look, my sister-in-law Beverly's pitying stare, and even the puzzled expressions on my grandchildren's faces. Though my hands trembled slightly in my lap, I maintained the poise I had perfected over 50 years. "Please continue, Mr. Patterson," I said softly. William sneered, leaning back in his chair. At 47, my son had grown increasingly similar to his father Frederick, tall, broad-shouldered, with that same determined set to his jaw. However, where Frederick's confidence was built on decades of hard work, William's came solely from a sense of entitlement. "Mum, let's not pretend," William said with scorn dripping from his voice. "Dad built this company from the ground up. You were just along for the ride." Denise nodded eagerly, her immaculate hand resting possessively on William's arm. "Frederick always believed business decisions should remain with those who truly understand business," she added without even glancing in my direction. I swallowed the familiar ache, the same sorrow I had been carrying for so many years. At 72, I had grown used to being ignored, dismissed, and treated as if my sole role in our family was to give birth to William and support Frederick. They never noticed the long nights I spent going over contracts when Frederick was too tired, the client connections I cultivated while organizing countless dinners, the prudent financial choices I advised Frederick on when his ambition exceeded his judgment. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and reminded us, "This is only an initial meeting." He added that the formal reading would happen next week once all the paperwork was ready. "What is there to prepare?" William insisted. "Dad left the business to me, the house to Mom for her lifetime, and the rest divided between us. We all know that was his plan." I caught Mr. Patterson's gaze, and something in his look made me sit up a bit straighter. Frederick and I had talked privately many times during his final months, as the cancer slowly took him from us. During those quiet conversations, when medication dulled his pain and lowered his defenses, my husband had shared many regrets, especially about William. "I spoiled him too much," Frederick had murmured one night, his hand holding mine with surprising strength. "I thought I was showing love, but I only taught him to expect everything handed on a silver platter. I had tried to comfort him. He'll learn, though deep inside I doubted it." Frederick's eyes had. The night had never been clearer than it was that evening, clearer than it had been for weeks. "No, Margaret, not unless something compels him to act." As I observed William's justified fury, I finally grasped what Frederick had tried to explain. My son genuinely believed he was entitled to everything his father had created without earning any part of it. "The estate is more complicated than you might assume, Mr. William," Mr. Patterson, keeping the surname neutral, remarked cautiously. "Your father made some important adjustments in his final months." William suddenly looked up. "Adjustments? What adjustments?" I focused on my clasped hands, feeling a calmness I could not explain wash over me. Frederick had never revealed his full plan, but he had asked me to trust him one last time. "Wait and see, Margaret," he had said with that familiar sparkle in his eye, the same one that made me fall in love with him decades ago. "Promise me you will hold your ground when the moment arrives." "This is absurd," William declared now, rising so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Whatever Dad arranged, I will challenge it if needed. Mom lacks business sense. She would ruin the company within a month." "William," I spoke softly, breaking my silence after his outburst, "your father devoted over 45 years building Harrington Manufacturing. Don't you believe he had the right to decide its future? My son stared at me as if I had suggested the world was flat, refusing to leave the inheritance to me, his mother, but expecting it to go to himself. The only child, the one who had worked alongside his father for 2 decades, not to me. A housewife who struggles to use even a simple smartphone. The casual harshness hurt, yet I did not waver. Beneath William's show of confidence, I noticed something unfamiliar in his gaze. It was fear. He had placed more hope on this inheritance than I had ever guessed. As everyone started to leave the room, Denise stopped by my seat, leaning close as if to hug me. Her voice was a sharp whisper close to my ear. "Do not get any ideas, Margaret. William is ready to fight for what is rightfully his." I gently squeezed her hand and replied, "In the end, we all receive what we are meant to get, dear." When I was finally alone with Mr. Patterson, he looked at me with genuine concern. "Are you all right, Mrs. Harrington?" I nodded as a strange feeling of lightness spread through my chest. Frederick had known exactly what he was doing, had he not? Mr. Patterson's professional mask softened into a slight smile. "Your husband was very wise, and he loved you more than you may realize." As I gathered my handbag to leave, thoughts of the fortune William had no clue about filled my mind. The $11 million Frederick had quietly accumulated outside the company's value, and what my husband intended to do with it. The upcoming week promised to change everything. For the first time in many years, I found myself eager for the future. The days between the meetings seemed to stretch on indefinitely. I spent most of that time alone in the house that Frederick and I had lived in for 43 years, running my fingers along the familiar surfaces and recalling that we had purchased this home when William was just a child. A simple 3-bedroom house that felt vast compared to our initial apartment. Frederick had just landed his first significant contract, and I had recently left my teaching profession to support his expanding company. "Temporary," he assured me as I packed away my education diploma, only until things settled down. Yet, things never quite settled enough for me to resume teaching. Instead, I became the invisible backbone of Harrington Manufacturing, overseeing our household, raising William, entertaining clients, and reviewing contracts after hours, while Frederick took on the company's public persona. I stopped by the mantel, lifting a photo from William's university graduation. Frederick stood proudly next to him, both dressed in matching suits, their stances equally confident. I stood a bit aside, smiling yet somehow detached. Even then, I noticed the pattern emerging, though I was powerless to change it. The doorbell rang, breaking my reverie. Beverly stood on the porch, holding a casserole. "Thought you might need some company," my sister-in-law said, moving past me into the kitchen. Unlike Frederick, who was warm and outgoing, Beverly had always been painfully straightforward. "You look awful, Margaret." I nervously touched my disheveled hair. "I haven't been sleeping well." Beverly set down her dish and looked me directly in the eyes. "William has been calling me. He says Frederick might have altered the will. Maybe he left you more than your share." She spoke bluntly. I made air quotes around the final words. "The reading is scheduled for tomorrow," I said gently. "Stop pretending, Margaret." "Did Frederick leave the business to you?" I met her eyes calmly. Frederick and I never talked about the specifics of his will. Beverly scoffed. "Sure, 50 years together, and he never once mentioned his intentions for the multi-million-dollar company you were part of building." Frederick made his own choices. She examined me silently for a moment. "You know, I have never understood you. You let Frederick and William treat you poorly for decades. Even now, you stand up for them." I turned away, focusing on preparing some tea. "You have not lived my life, Beverly." "No, thank goodness," she muttered. "I would have abandoned Frederick the moment he took credit for my work, which from what I saw happened sometime around 1980. The kettle started to whistle, sparing me from replying. As I poured the hot water into cups, Beverly continued, her tone getting softer a bit. "Do you recall when William was about 12 and Frederick bought him that absurd racing bike?" I nodded, placing a cup in front of her. William had begged for that bike endlessly. Despite my worries, it was far too advanced for him. You warned Frederick it was risky. Frederick bought it nonetheless. 3 weeks later, William broke his arm. That was so many years ago, I whispered. The point is, you were right. You were always right, Margaret, especially about William. You saw clearly what Frederick was creating by spoiling him. A privileged, entitled man who never had to work for anything. I collapsed into a chair, suddenly drained of energy. What do you expect me to say, Beverly? That I failed as a mother? That I should have been more assertive? Beverly reached out across the table and held my hand, a rare moment of warmth from her. She said, I want you to stop blaming yourself for William's personality. Frederick shaped who he is. Maybe you could have tried harder, but Frederick would have simply gone behind your back anyway. Tears welled up in my eyes. I did try. When William was at college, he ran into trouble with alcohol and failing his courses. I wanted there to be consequences. Frederick just threw money at the issue and transferred him to another school. I remember, Beverly said with a serious tone. Then Frederick handed him a vice presidency right after graduation, even though he had no experience. I sighed as old memories rushed back. In William's first year at the company, he lost an important client because of his arrogance. Frederick covered for him, telling everyone it was a strategic move. Now, William believes he deserves to run the entire company. He has been working there for 20 years, I pointed out. Beverly scoffed. Worked? He shows up late, leaves early, claims his team's achievements as his own, and spends more time on the golf course than at his desk. Meanwhile, he and Denise are splurging on everything. The new vacation home, the boat, private schools for the children. I looked up sharply and asked, how bad is it? Beverly hesitated. There are rumors, Margaret. William has been using his position. The expected inheritance was surrounded by debts up to their necks. This did not come as a complete shock. William and Denise had consistently lived beyond their financial limits. Lately, they had been pressuring Frederick to formalize the succession plan, putting into writing what William believed was his undeniable right. I leaned in and asked softly, did Frederick know? Beverly gave a slight nod. Jim from accounting had brought some worrying transactions to his attention about half a year ago. William had been awarding himself unauthorized bonuses and charging personal expenses to the company. This was around the same time Frederick had started having those serious private discussions with me and Mr. Patterson. Suddenly, the timing all became clear. Once Beverly left, I headed to Frederick's study, a space I rarely entered after his passing. His presence felt most potent in the worn leather chair, molded perfectly to his shape, with the faint scent of his cologne still hanging in the air. As I ran my hand over his desk, memories flooded back. Countless nights when I brought him coffee as he worked late, moments when I shared my ideas on contracts or negotiation tactics. In the bottom drawer, I discovered a small leather journal I had never seen before. Inside, penned in Frederick's neat handwriting, was a letter addressed to me. It began, My dearest Margaret, if you are reading this, I am already gone, and you are wondering if you have spent your life being a doormat. The answer is both yes and no. Yes, I took advantage of your kindness and intelligence far too often. No, it was not your fault. It was mine for being too proud to openly admit how much I depended on you. The letter went on for many pages. Frederick confessed that he had realized too late the terrible sense of entitlement he had fostered in William, how he had observed our son expertly manipulate and charm his way through life without ever gaining true character. I cannot change what has already happened, the letter ended, but I am determined to influence what lies ahead. Forgive me for the suffering that will come, but believe me when I say it is necessary. William must learn what neither you nor I ever taught him, that nothing valuable is obtained without effort. I am relying on you to be stronger than I ever was. With all my love, Frederick. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. Tomorrow I would uncover precisely what Frederick had arranged and why William was filled with such fear. The day before the final will reading, I chose to visit my grandchildren. William and Denise had always governed my time with them, organizing our meetings with the care of diplomats negotiating peace agreements. Yet today I did not call ahead. I simply drove to their large house resembling a tutoring center and pressed the doorbell. Maria, the housekeeper, answered, her eyes growing wide when she saw me. "Mrs. Harrington, I didn't realize you were coming today," she said. I asked if Denise was home, already knowing she would be at her regular tennis lesson. "No, ma'am, only the children are here. They are finishing their breakfast." I smiled warmly. Just right, I thought. I wanted to surprise them. Maria hesitated, clearly unsure whether to let me in without Denise's approval. Yet her regard for me as the family's matriarch prevailed. She stepped aside to allow my entrance. Emma and Jacob, aged 12 and 10, were perched on stools at the kitchen island, still dressed in their pajamas, despite it being almost 10 o'clock in the morning. They looked up with surprise when I came in. Emma's voice was uncertain as she said, "Grandma." I explained, "It's a surprise visit. Mum didn't tell you I was coming." I placed my purse down and added warmly, "I missed both of you." Jacob, who was always more openly affectionate, hopped off his stool and gave me a quick hug before moving away. Emma remained seated, watching me with caution. I asked casually, "Are your parents home?" though I already anticipated their absence. "Dad is at work," Jacob replied. "Mum is playing tennis." I nodded and took a seat at the island. "How is school?" I inquired. Emma shrugged. "Fine. Did you end up finishing that science project you were doing? The one about ecosystems?" Emma's eyes showed a flicker of surprise. "You remember that?" "Of course I do," I responded softly. "I remember everything you tell me." A brief look of confusion passed over her face. "But Mom says you don't really pay attention to us, that you are too distracted." My heart tightened painfully, but I kept my face composed. "What else does your mum say about me?" The children exchanged looks, communicating silently between themselves. "You can tell me. I promise I will not be upset." Jacob bit his lip and confessed, "She says you never really wanted Dad to be born. You felt bitter about having to give up your career to raise him." The harshness of that deception momentarily took my breath away. From the instant William was placed in my arms, I loved him deeply. Sure, I grieved the loss of my teaching profession, but never once regretted my son. Then Denise spoke hesitantly. "She says you tried to persuade Grandpa Frederick not to let Dad work at the company because you were jealous." I closed my eyes for a brief moment to steady myself. "Do you really believe that?" Both children stared down at their breakfast bowls. "It is all right," I said gently. "These are complex adult matters, but you must know I have always loved your father immensely and adore both of you beyond measure." I spent the following hour genuinely connecting with my grandchildren, possibly for the first time. Without Denise's watchful presence, they gradually opened up, sharing tales of school and friendships. I realized how little I actually understood about their daily lives and how effectively Denise had kept them distant from me. As I prepared to leave, not wanting to be present when Denise returned, Emma suddenly asked, "Grandma, are you and Dad arguing over Grandpa's money?" I hesitated, choosing my words with care. "Your grandfather worked tirelessly all his life. He wished his money to be used responsibly. Dad claims you are trying to take what belongs to him," Jacob stated bluntly. A wave of sorrow swept over me. "Is that what he told you?" Emma nodded seriously. "He was truly upset," she said. "You never supported him the way Grandpa did." I bent down to their height, meeting their young, worried eyes. Sometimes grown-ups have conflicts over important matters, but that does not lessen the love we all have for you. Regardless of what occurs with Grandpa's will, you will always remain my beloved grandchildren. During the drive back, my vision blurred with tears. Denise had not only poisoned my bond with my grandchildren, but had also rewritten the entire story of our family. In her version, I became the antagonist, the envious mother who resented her own son's achievements. I pulled off the road, unable to go on driving. The hurt was overwhelming and raw. For all these years, I had thought that William's cold attitude toward me was merely the outcome of Frederick's spoiling and masculine pride. I never expected he held such deep bitterness, that he truly believed I had tried to hold him back. When I reached home at last, a familiar vehicle was parked in my driveway. Thomas Reed, Frederick's oldest friend and a financial manager at the company, was waiting on my porch. "Thomas," I said, wiping away the last drops of my tears, "this is surprising." His worn face was serious. "We need to discuss William," he said. Inside, Thomas refused coffee and got straight to the matter. "William has been borrowing heavily against his future inheritance." I nodded quietly. Beverly had mentioned their financial troubles. "It is even worse than that," Thomas said grimly. "He has risked everything on a real..." The real estate development in Colorado was luxurious, focused on ski condos, yet the project was collapsing in a dramatic fashion. How severe was the situation? William was almost $2 million in debt, with nothing to show for it, except unfinished buildings that would not meet the code inspection requirements. I sank into a chair. "Did Frederick know about this?" Thomas nodded affirmatively. Frederick had found out about it around 7 months earlier. William had been illegally siphoning money from the company to cover his own debts. Embezzling? That word hit me like a physical blow. "Are you sure? I possess the records." Frederick confronted him privately. They arranged a repayment scheme to avoid criminal prosecution. Frederick was shattered. 7 months ago, when Frederick's illness seemed to worsen abruptly, he began having intense private discussions with me and Mr. Patterson. William was relying on his inheritance to rescue him. Thomas added, "If he does not receive what he expects..." He left the sentence unfinished. William would not only suffer embarrassment, he could lose everything. "Why are you revealing this to me only now?" I inquired. Thomas's demeanor softened since Frederick asked me to inform you after the will was read. He wanted you to grasp the reality of the situation. William is not simply entitled Margaret, he is desperate. After Thomas departed, I remained alone in my silent living room, feeling the burden of this revelation pressing heavily upon me. My son, who had been given everything throughout his life, still craved more. He had stolen from his father, deceived his family, and now counted on his inheritance to save him. William faced the repercussions of his behavior. Tomorrow, during the reading of the will, he would learn whether Frederick had given him a chance to survive or severed ties, forcing him to manage on his own. The morning of the final will reading arrived bright and clear. I carefully put on a navy suit, one that Frederick had always favored, my only nod to sentimentality. As I clasped the pearl earrings he had given me on our 40th anniversary, the doorbell rang. Mr. Patterson appeared on my porch, his face solemn. "Mrs. Harrington, I thought perhaps we could travel together," he said. I raised a brow. "The reading is not for 2 hours." "I know," he replied. "I thought you might want some time to prepare." I invited him inside, a pit of unease growing in my stomach. "Is there an issue?" Once we settled in my living room, Mr. Patterson pulled out a thick folder from his briefcase. "Before we meet the others, I must explain Frederick's plan in detail. He was very precise about the timing." "I'm listening," I said, folding my hands in my lap to steady my nerves. "Frederick reached out to me 8 months ago, shortly after his diagnosis. He was worried about William's financial trustworthiness." I nodded. "I have since found out about the embezzlement." Mr. Patterson seemed relieved. "Good, that makes this easier." Frederick was deeply disturbed by William's choices, not just the legal aspects, but what they said about his character. He opened the folder, revealing a collection of documents. Frederick had reorganized his estate with 2. The main objectives revolve around safeguarding the company's future and ensuring you have both security and authority. Authority is a word that felt unusual when applied to my role within the family. Indeed, Frederick realized quite late that you were consistently the more cautious decision-maker. He came to understand that William's feeling of entitlement was a result of Frederick's own behavior, always granting William what he desired and never obliging him to earn his position. Hearing Frederick's thoughts mirrored by Mr. Patterson brought an unexpected sense of acknowledgement. For many years, I had expressed these very concerns, only to be dismissed as overly cautious or lacking in business insight. Mr. Patterson explained that the will establishes a trust. Every one of Frederick's possessions, including the company, the real estate, and the investments, will be managed within this trust. You, Margaret, are appointed as the primary trustee. I gazed at him in disbelief. Me? Not William? He confirmed that Frederick trusted you to make decisions prioritizing the family's long-term well-being instead of short-term pleasures. My thoughts spun, struggling to absorb this reversal of the responsibilities I had held for 5 decades. I eventually spoke, saying William will challenge this. Mr. Patterson's face darkened, which clarified why he had inserted some uncommon clauses. He produced another document, marked with several highlighted paragraphs. If William disputes the will, he loses everything. There will be no exceptions. I murmured almost inaudibly, everything. This is his stance. At the company, his inheritance was involved as well. The house they lived in was technically owned by Harrington Manufacturing. I suddenly stood up, feeling the need to move. This all seemed quite drastic. Frederick was safeguarding the company. And you, Mr. Patterson said, he anticipated William would try to intimidate you into handing over control. This was his method of preventing that from occurring. I walked over to the window, looking out at the garden Frederick and I had cared for together through many years. What about my grandchildren? Emma and Jacob should not bear the consequences of their father's errors. Frederick considered that as well. Mr. Patterson then produced another document. The trust contains provisions for their education and future well-being. No matter what William did, those funds were completely inaccessible to William or Denise under any conditions. A sense of relief washed over me. No matter the outcome, my grandchildren would be safe. There was more, Mr. Patterson continued, regarding the 11 million. I faced him again. Yes, it was separate from the company's assets. It was money Frederick had set aside over time, investments that had done extraordinarily well. William was unaware this money even existed. I had gathered as much. I mentioned that Frederick had spoken about it to me only once in passing. This money belongs to you fully, Mr. Patterson explained. No trust, no strings attached. Frederick wanted you to have assets that were completely independent from the company and William. I sank back into my chair, feeling overwhelmed. Why had Frederick not told me any of this before he passed away? Mr. Patterson's face softened as he spoke. He mentioned that you might have attempted to dissuade him, that you had devoted your life to justifying William, striving to maintain harmony. His words stung because there was some truth in them. I had spent many years smoothing things over, making excuses, trying to shield the delicate balance of our family. There is a letter, Mr. Patterson added, retrieving a sealed envelope from the folder. Frederick asked me to deliver this to you before the will is read. My name appeared on the front in Frederick's firm, confident handwriting. I accepted it with shaky hands, but chose not to open it. Certain matters remained too personal to share, even with Mr. Patterson. What do you believe William will do? I asked instead. He will be furious, Mr. Patterson replied straightforwardly, possibly threatening. Nearly certainly, he will attempt to intimidate you into altering the conditions. And if that approach fails, he will likely challenge the will despite the forfeiture clause. He will argue that you influenced Frederick while he was ill and that Frederick lacked mental capacity. A surge of anger rose within me. Frederick remained sharp until the very end. We have thorough proof of his sound mind, Mr. Patterson reassured me. Numerous witnesses and medical assessments back this up. William won't succeed in a legal dispute, but he could prolong the conflict, making the situation difficult. I thought about my grandchildren and the falsehoods Denise had already told them. How much worse could it become if William declared all-out war? "What would be your recommendation?" I asked Mr. Patterson. I thought over the matter carefully. Frederick was convinced that William had to face genuine consequences for once in his life. Without that, he would never develop into the man he was meant to be. "And you?" "I believe Frederick was right," I said simply. "But I also feel you must brace yourself for the repercussions. William will not accept this quietly." I glanced at the clock. We had 1 hour before we had to leave for the reading. 60 minutes for me to determine whether I would carry out Frederick's plan or seek some middle ground to maintain peace, as I had done all my life. "I would appreciate a few moments alone if you do not mind," I said. After Mr. Patterson stepped outside, I unfolded Frederick's letter with trembling hands. His familiar handwriting became blurry as tears welled up in my eyes. "My dearest Margaret," it began, "by now Mr. Patterson has explained everything. You must be wondering if I have lost my mind putting you in this situation. The truth is, I finally found my sanity. For 50 years, you have been the foundation of this family, the quiet power I depended on but seldom praised. Publicly, I took advantage of your kindness and your readiness to step aside and let me take the spotlight. I failed William even more deeply. I gave him everything except what he truly needed: boundaries, consequences, and the opportunity to earn his own success. Now, he is a man who takes what he desires without regard for others, believing he deserves the rewards of other people's work. I cannot change the past, but I can strive to influence the future. William must learn what I never taught him, and you need to assert the authority you have earned through a lifetime filled with wisdom and sacrifice. It will not be simple. He will resist. He will rage. He will use every manipulation he has ever mastered. But Margaret, my dear, you are stronger than you realize. You have always been the true force within our family. Now it is time for everyone else to see that as well. With all my love forever, Frederick." I carefully folded the letter, holding it close to my heart. Then I wiped away my tears, reapplied my lipstick, and went to inform Mr. Patterson I was prepared. Frederick was right. It was time to stop making excuses, to stop smoothing over conflicts. For William's sake and my own, it was time to stand firm. The conference room at Patterson and Associates was packed to the brim. William and Denise sat directly opposite me. Both were impeccably dressed. William wore a charcoal suit that matched the stormy look in his eyes. Denise donned a cream dress that likely cost more than most people earn in a month. Beverly sat beside me, her quiet presence a steady source of support. Several extended family members and company executives lined the walls, their curious eyes shifting between William and me. William leaned forward across the table. "You seem proud of yourself, Mom," he whispered, his tone low so only I could hear. "Did you and Dad plan something during his final days?" I met his gaze steadily. "Your father was of sound mind." "Until the end," William said, his eyes narrowing. "We shall find out." Mr. Patterson entered the room accompanied by 2 colleagues carrying piles of documents. He solemnly nodded to everyone gathered. "Thank you all for coming. We are here for the official reading of Franklin Harrington's final will and testament." Before starting, I must clarify that Mr. Harrington updated his will 7 months ago, witnessed by several people, including his doctor, who confirmed his mental soundness. William shifted uneasily in his seat, the first sign of doubt creeping across his face. Mr. Patterson adjusted his glasses and began reciting the formal legal introduction. I could barely catch the words, my attention drawn instead to my son's expression. Despite all I had uncovered, despite his harshness and flawed decisions, my heart ached for what was about to unfold. No mother wishes to watch her child endure pain, even when it is necessary. "Now to the allocation of assets," Mr. Patterson declared, his voice slicing through my thoughts. Franklin Harrington had set up the Harrington Family Trust, into which he placed all company assets, properties, and investments. William nodded with impatience because this he had anticipated. The trustee granted full control over business choices, distributions, and management is Margaret Eleanor Harrington. A shocked whisper spread through the room. William's face lost all color. "That cannot be," he said in a dangerously low tone. "There must be some error." "There is no error," Mr. Patterson stated firmly. "Mrs. Harrington holds full authority as trustee." Denise tightened her grip on William's arm. "What about William? He is the only son and the rightful heir." Mr. Patterson continued, "William James Harrington will maintain his role as Vice President of Operations, reporting directly to the Board of Directors, which Mrs. Harrington will chair." William's expression shifted from stunned to furious. "This is absurd. My mother lacks any business expertise. Father built that company. I worked alongside him for 20 years, and now you tell me she is in charge." "Your father's decision was explicit," Mr. Patterson replied calmly. "My father was dying," William shot back. "He was not thinking clearly. Mother clearly manipulated him when he was vulnerable." I braced myself at that accusation but stayed composed. "William, please, no." He slammed his hand down on the table. "I will not allow you to take what rightfully belongs to me. I will challenge this. I will fight with every ounce of strength I possess." Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "Before you make that choice, Mr. Harrington, you should know about the contest clause." "The what?" William demanded. "If any beneficiary disputes this will or tries to obstruct the trust's administration, they lose every benefit entirely and permanently." William laughed skeptically. "You are bluffing." Mr. Patterson silently handed him the relevant document. I observed as William. He scanned the document, his face shifting from disbelief to outright shock. "This is unbelievable," he murmured. "He plans to disinherit me if I challenge this." "This injustice?" "No, not disinheritance," Mr. Patterson explained. "The trust guarantees your ongoing employment and a generous yearly payout, but only if you meet your professional responsibilities adequately. However, if you dispute the will, you lose everything, including your role at the EU company." William turned to me, his eyes fiery. "You did this. You turned him against me." I shook my head sorrowfully. "No, William, your own actions caused this." Confusion flickered across his features. "Your father knew about the embezzlement," I said softly. "He was aware of the failed real estate deal, the $2 million in debt, everything." William paled, his eyes darting across the room. Some of the executives shifted uncomfortably, clearly hearing this for the first time. "That is a lie," he spat. "Thomas Reed provided him with the evidence," I continued, my voice steady despite the pain inside. "Your father shielded you from legal trouble, but he could not overlook what it revealed about your integrity." Denise watched William with growing concern. "What is she talking about? What embezzlement?" William ignored her, directing his fury at me. "You had no right to reveal my private matters in front of everyone." I responded, "These are the same people whose positions you risked. The company that has been supporting your way of life could have faced significant consequences because of your behavior. That is enough." William stood up suddenly. "I refuse to sit here and be preached to by a woman who has never experienced working a single day in her life. Dad was the one who founded that company. I contributed to its growth. You have no entitlement to any part of it." Mr. Patterson, remains unchanged, interrupted. "There are further details about the will that you must hear, Mr. Harrington." William waved his hand in dismissal. "I am not interested. This matter is heading to court. Mom can enjoy this temporary feeling of power, but it will not last." As he turned to leave, Mr. Patterson's next word stopped him in his tracks. Besides the company assets, Frederick Harrington had personal investments worth approximately $11 million. William froze and slowly turned back to the table. "What did you say?" $11 million in personal investments, separate from the company, Mr. Patterson repeated, "accumulated during the last 30 years. William slumped back into his seat, his face unreadable. And I imagine that is included in the trust as well. No, replied Mr. Patterson plainly. That sum is left directly to Mrs. Harrington without any restrictions or conditions. The room grew utterly quiet. William looked at me as if he were seeing me anew. 11 million, he stated flatly. Dad left you 11 million outright. I nodded calmly, controlling my excitement even though my heart was pounding. He truly did. William laughed, a bitter and unpleasant sound. All these years you have played the modest housewife, a devoted partner who gave up everything for Dad's career. And all this time, you were only waiting to seize control. That is not true, I said softly. I never desired this, William. All I wanted was for our family to remain united. Our family, he spat. There is no family anymore. You made sure of that. Denise, who had been surprisingly silent, suddenly spoke. William, don't act impulsively. We need to consider this carefully. He turned sharply toward her. Consider what? How my mother has robbed me of my inheritance. Think about our choices, she replied nervously, glancing toward the observing crowd. This is not the proper place for such a discussion. William disregarded her and focused his anger on me. I will contest this. I do not care what the clause in the will states. No court will approve this theft. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and said, The trust also contains sections for Emma and Jacob's education and future welfare. Those funds cannot be accessed by anyone except them, no matter what challenges arise concerning the will. William's expression twisted with rage. So now you are bribing my children, trying to turn them against me as well. No, I replied firmly. Your father and I wanted to guarantee their future, no matter what happens. Their future is my responsibility, not yours, William snapped. You believe you can purchase their loyalty with trust money. I met his gaze steadily. This is not about loyalty. It is about protection. It is about ensuring your children do not suffer from any financial troubles you might encounter. The weight of the statement lingered. The tension in the room was palpable. William was fully aware that I understood just how fragile his financial situation was and how close he stood to losing everything he owned. This meeting is finished, he declared, rising to his feet. Let's go, Denise. We are leaving now. As they hurried out, the space filled with murmurs and whispers. I remained perfectly still, Frederick's letter weighing steadily in my pocket, a small comfort. The most difficult part had been faced. What followed was the challenging aftermath. 3 months passed in slow motion. The initial shock following the reading of the will had spread through our family, and the company like a pebble, causing ripples across a still pond, waves radiating endlessly outward. William consulted 6 lawyers, each delivering the same verdict. The will was unbreakable. Frederick had meticulously recorded his sound mental state, his justifications for the unconventional provisions, and William's financial wrongdoings. Any attempt to contest it would not only fail, but also activate a forfeiture clause, leaving William empty-handed. During those months, I immersed myself in learning about the company I now commanded. Thomas Reed quickly became my most trusted advisor, patiently guiding me through the business that Frederick and I had created together, but which I had only ever observed from a distance. To my amazement, many aspects came naturally to me. Years of listening to Frederick's dinner conversations, examining contracts late into the night, and quietly offering input had provided a foundation I had not fully recognized. The company staff met my leadership with mixed reactions, some accepting it readily while others hesitated. Some people expressed open doubt, while others showed cautious encouragement. I avoided making any drastic moves, instead concentrating on consistent and careful leadership, exactly what Frederick would have desired. William had been noticeably missing from both the workplace and family events. According to Beverly, who somehow always seemed to have all the information, he and Denise were reconsidering their plans, which I suspected meant they were desperately attempting to handle their overwhelming debt without the unexpected financial help they had been counting on. I had not seen my grandchildren since that day in their kitchen, and the quiet from them was the most heart-wrenching part of this entire experience. One crisp autumn morning, I was going over quarterly reports in Frederick's former home office, which had become mine, when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I did not anticipate anyone visiting. Opening the front door, I saw William standing alone on the porch. He appeared changed, thinner, with dark shadows beneath his eyes, and a humility in his stance that I had never noticed before. "William," I said, surprise making my voice falter. "I was not expecting you." "May I come inside?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual assuredness. I stepped aside, inviting him into the living room. He sat rigidly on the sofa's edge and declined my offer of coffee. "How are you?" I inquired when the silence grew too long. He let out a hollow laugh. "What do you think? My life is falling apart." I remained silent, sensing he had not come simply to say that. "We lost the house," he finally admitted. "The bank completed the foreclosure last week." Although I had been bracing myself for this news, hearing it still stung deeply. "I'm sorry, William." "Are you really?" he asked, but without the bitterness I had anticipated. "This is what Dad wanted, isn't it? For me to lose everything." I shook my head. "Your father wanted you to realize the true worth of what you had. He wanted you to become the man he believed you were capable of being." William looked down at his hands. "We're staying with Denise's sister for the time being. It's a humbling experience, to say the least." "What about the children?" I inquired, trying to mask the concern in my voice. "They're bewildered and angry. They don't understand why we had to give up our home, why moving schools was necessary." A sharp pang of guilt churned in my stomach. "William, I never wished for them to endure hardship." "I know," he said softly, catching me off guard. "Denise told me about your visit and what the children said you shared with them." I stiffened, unsure of his meaning. "You didn't speak badly of me," he went on. "You could have, but you chose not to, despite everything I've said against you." I reached out across the table, cautiously placing my hand over his. "You're my son. No matter what happens, that will never change." Tears welled up in William's eyes, something I hadn't witnessed since his childhood. "I've turned everything upside down. Mom, the business, my marriage, my kids, our stability. It's not too late to make things right," I reassured him softly. He looked up suddenly. "Is that why you think I came? To ask for money?" "No," I replied honestly. "I believe you came because you are my son and you are hurting." William seemed to deflate, his last bit of defensive anger fading away. "Denise has left," he announced suddenly. "She's filing for divorce. She said she did not sign up for financial disaster." Despite everything Denise had done, I felt a twinge of compassion for William. "I am sorry to hear that." "Are you really?" he asked once more. This time, genuine interest colored his voice after how she had treated you, how she had turned the children against you. "I am sorry for your pain," I clarified, "and for what this means for Emma and Jacob." William gave a slow nod. "They ask about you," he revealed, "especially since Denise left. They want to know if what she told them was true." Hope stirred within me. "And what did you say to them?" I asked. "The truth," he replied plainly. "That their grandmother is kind and loves them deeply. That I have been unfair to you." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I would like to see them if that is possible." "That is partly why I am here," William confessed. "They need stability now, people they can depend on." The unspoken plea hung in the air between us. "They are always welcome here," I reassured him. "And so are you, William." He nodded, eyes lowered. "I do not know what comes next, Mom. I have lost nearly everything. My marriage, my home, probably my job as well. Once the board sees how poorly I have managed my department, I chose my words with care. Your father entrusted me with control of the company. because he had faith in my judgment. If I decide that you are worthy of a second chance, a genuine one, would you be ready to prove it? Truly prove it this time? William looked up, a trace of his old defensiveness flickering across his face. What exactly does that mean? It means starting from scratch, I replied with resolve. A lower position, a decreased salary, close supervision of your tasks. It means showing your worth not as Frederick Harrington's son, but as an employee who actually contributes to the company. He remained silent for a significant moment. And if I decline, then that is your decision, I stated plainly. The trust fund will still support Emma and Jacob no matter what. You will not go hungry, but your lifestyle will change drastically. William rose and moved toward the window, looking out at the garden where he had once played as a child. Dad had really thought this through, hadn't he? Yes, I confirmed. He loved you, William, enough to finally offer what you truly needed, instead of just what you desired. William turned back, his face showing more vulnerability than I had seen since he was young. And you, Mom? After all I have said and done, how can you remain willing to help me? I stepped beside him at the window. Because I am your mother, and because I believe that people can change when circumstances demand it. Even someone as self-centered as me, he murmured softly. Especially you, I replied, gently touching his cheek. Because beneath everything, you are still the boy who wept over his pet goldfish. He had passed away, the one who used to provide his allowance. When you were 10, he gave to a homeless man and cradled your newborn daughter as if she were made of the most fragile glass. Tears streamed down William's cheeks. I am not worthy of another chance. Perhaps not, I admitted. Yet you are receiving one regardless. What you make of it is your choice. 2 weeks later, William settled into the guest cottage alongside Emma and Jacob. He began working in the purchasing division, a considerable demotion from his former role as vice president, yet an opportunity to understand the business thoroughly from the bottom up, something he should have done many years ago. Adjusting was challenging. There were moments when William's old sense of entitlement flared, moments he resented taking orders from individuals who had once been his juniors. Nevertheless, gradually and steadily, he started to evolve. The true happiness came from having my grandchildren close by. Emma and Jacob spent their afternoons with me after school, slowly abandoning the false story Denise had spun. We baked treats, sowed flowers in the garden, and held genuine conversations about their experiences, emotions, worries, and hopes for what lies ahead. "Grandma," Emma inquired one evening while we prepared dinner together, "are you and Dad going to be all right now?" I glanced out the window to see William assisting Jacob with a science experiment, his expression focused and patient in a way I had seldom witnessed before. "I believe we will be perfectly fine," I assured her. And for the first time in many years, I honestly felt that to be true. Frederick had been right from the start. Sometimes showing love means establishing tough limits, even when it breaks your heart to do so. William was at last becoming the man he was meant to be. Reliable, considerate, earning his rightful role in life instead of assuming it would be given without effort. As for me, at 72, I discovered a strength I had always carried inside but seldom tapped into. The business flourished under my guidance. My family was slowly recovering, and I had finally found my voice after many years of silence. Frederick's final gesture was not the fortune or the company. It was the opportunity for all of us to grow into our fullest selves, once released from the habits that had restrained us for so long. In the quiet of his last arrangement lay our salvation. William's, mine, and even Frederick's. A heritage far more valuable than $11 million. Now, I want to hear from you, who have heard my story. What would you decide if you were in my position? Have you experienced something similar? Share your thoughts below. Meanwhile, I'm placing on the last screen 2 other stories beloved by this channel, which are sure to astonish you. Thank you for watching until this point.